This is CheloniaCast, episode 66. Today we're joined by Jacob Marlin, who is the founder and executive director of the Belize Foundation for Research and Environmental Education. This group has done an incredible amount of work. They operate on a 1,153 acre preserve sandwiched between a large tract of wilderness in the Maya Mountains. They're doing an incredible amount of work with dermatomes conservation, cacao agroforestry, and many other projects. We're really excited to sit down with Jacob and some of the other members of the BFREE team today and hear a bit about the story of starting the preserve and the initiative. So really excited to talk to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the curiosity and the interest.
All right, so we like to start this podcast off pretty straightforward. It's just kind of what got you interested in turtles or conservation as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Well, what got me interested in conservation as a whole, because I guess that leads to turtles, is really from a very, very young age as a kid. I just loved being outside and loved nature, like lots of animal and conservation enthusiasts. Particularly my passion for reptiles and amphibians was just developed when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and so over those years it grew, so really the first 20, 30 years of my life I was really just kind of getting to understand, learn, appreciate, and interact with all kinds of reptiles and amphibians, particularly snakes actually, and worked at numbers of zoos. I worked with federal and state agencies with alligators and had a large private collection of all kinds of reptiles, amphibians, particularly snakes, and got to work with a lot of different turtle species and tortoise species during my zoo career. So turtles. My real involvement with turtles really started here at BFREE, even though I'd worked with them in different capacities, primarily in zoo settings. And some field work as well, but I really became much more passionate and hands-on with the dermatomes Central American River Turtle Project here at BFREE. That's when really it became much more of a focus.
Right. And so that project was a big collaboration early on, but maybe we could focus a little bit on how you ended up in Belize and sort of how BFREE came to be, and if that was the initial acronym you used, or what kind of collaboration went into coming down here and starting this amazing group.
Thank you. Yeah, so it was really in the early 80s when I was around 20, or mid 80s when I was a teenager, and then in my early 20s during my sort of early college career, that I really became passionate about tropical forests and wildlife, and I was very concerned about the loss of rainforests. During that time, you didn't hear the term climate change. There was not a climate crisis that people talked about. You didn't hear the ozone layer issues weren't talked about. Like, so much of what we're facing today was not really part of the discussion. This is like 80, 83, 84, 85, 83 through 90, like, the topic, if you heard in the news about the loss of biodiversity in some scale, habitat destruction, all kinds of things, but there was a lot of news about tropical rainforests disappearing at alarming rates, and the value of them. And so I was particularly interested in getting involved in a tropical rainforest conservation project, and I couldn't quite know how to do that as a young 19, 20-year-old. How to get involved, intern, volunteer, what to do, where to go. So I actually heard about this little tiny country in Central America called Belize. About that time, I must have been 19, and 160,000 people in the entire country. There were 3 paved roads in the entire country at that time. There was 1 traffic light in the entire country, and it was broken. It was 70% under natural forest cover, 45% of the country was under protected area status. It seemed to me like an amazing place to go and see what was going on and just see the rainforests and the wildlife. And I was particularly going on a herping adventure, so I was really going to go look for crocs and turtles and snakes and all that stuff, of course. That's always what sort of drove me where I traveled. But so it was that first trip to Belize in 1986 was incredible, and I kept coming back year after year as this idea for getting involved with, and then I realized, wait a minute, there's so much need. Instead of me like tagging onto a project, maybe I could start one. I didn't really have any skills in this area, but so I came to Belize 5 or 6 times between 86 and 92. Every year I came. And then in 1993, I got involved in an expedition to go up into a place called the Bladen Nature Reserve, which is just a quarter of a mile away from where we're sitting right now, across the river from BFREE. And to do the reptile and amphibian inventory as part of this team of biologists doing this rapid ecological assessment. So we went up into the reserve for 15 days, and it's incredible. Found a new species of amphibian and documented all kinds of reptiles, amphibians that hadn't been documented in the place before, pictures of some species that hadn't been photographed before, and all kinds of stuff. So it was an amazing trip, and at that time the Bladen Nature Reserve was just a paper park. It had just been declared a nature reserve in 90, and this was March of 93 that I was on this expedition. And a nature reserve in Belize is the equivalent of a IUCN Category 1A, which means a true wilderness area, no tourism, no roads, no infrastructure, an area set aside to keep it in its natural undisturbed state forever. Only permitted activities are allowed. You have to get a permit to even enter, and that would only be for science or maybe some educational activity. So going up into that reserve and having this incredible, amazing experience, seeing a truly wild lowland tropical forest that was completely unexplored and unstudied, and to see what we saw was very inspiring, and I realized, wow, maybe this is a place I can get involved. And so after that expedition, within a few days of walking out of the reserve, I met with the chief forest officer of the government, a guy named Earl Green, and I walked up to Earl Green in his office, and I proposed this idea of setting up a research and education facility back here. I'd already had this idea of developing some sort of project, some infrastructure, research station or somewhere. But I also, during those years before 93 on the expedition, I also was traveling to other countries. I was in Costa Rica, I was in Asia, I was traveling around to see where I could get involved in a conservation project. But I kept coming back to Belize every year. And I really felt like Belize had the greatest opportunity for me to have a lasting impact because it was so undeveloped, such a low population density, so much of its protected area, and so much area under protected status, and so wild and unexplored and unknown. I thought, wow, maybe this would be a place. And then going on that expedition in 93 into the Bladen solidified that idea. I said, wow, here is a place that only is a name on a map. It's a protected area. It's 100,000 acres, borders another 2 million acres of protected areas, roadless, uninhabited. This is a place that maybe I can make a difference. So when I met with that government official and I proposed this idea, incredibly, he said, that's a great idea. I said, what are the plans for this reserve? And he goes, well, we need to set up some sort of management program, but we don't have a plan for it. And I said, well, I would like to help set one up. And he said, well, how much money do you have to do this? And I said, well, I don't have any money, but I'll find some. But the point is that's the thing about Belize that I love so much and still do to this day. There I was, like a 24-year-old, what was I, 27-year-old, dressed in a t-shirt and pants without a business card or any degree. And I walk up to the equivalent of like what in the States would be like the head of the Department of the Interior without an appointment. And I get in his office and we have a chat, and he says, yeah, if you can find a piece of property that is bordering the Bladen, then we would love to work with you to set up a management program. You can't do it in the Bladen Reserve because that's a strict Category 1A. It's no infrastructure, no development. And so that 25-minute conversation after that expedition inspired me to quit my job. I was working at actually the Department of Herpetology at the Toledo Zoo in Ohio at the time. I was a zookeeper, actually. Quit my job, sold everything I owned, which including like a huge collection of about 150 snakes and a bunch of other stuff. sold everything I owned and bought an old truck and drove down to Belize. I was here by August of 93 to pursue looking for property and land by the Bladen Nature Reserve to set up this, what has become BFREE. It took over a year it took about 8 months before I found that there was in fact any private property around here, because these are all government protected areas.
Right.
But incredibly, I did find that there was a piece that had been surveyed out in 1983 and given to a Belizean guy by the founder of Belize, the godfather of Belize, the first prime minister. Gave it to this Belizean guy, and I met with him, and we had a chat, and he basically said, well, I'm not really interested in selling or leasing or anything, but you can stay there. And I was like, well, that's not really going to be good enough. I'm not just going to squat on the land and start a research project. But in fact, that's what happened. So that first year between 93, March of 93 was the expedition. August of 93, I'd moved down here with my girlfriend at the time. And by the next year, we had signed a sort of lease with the option to purchase, kind of this loose kind of thing with the landowner. And the name BFREE came about when we were all sitting around a campfire up by the Belize Zoo, and one night, and we were like, what are we going to call this place? Because at that point, it looked very likely like we were in fact going to at least spend time on this land. We weren't sure if we were going to end up owning it. It was not clear. The landowner wasn't just going to sell it to us. But we were sitting around the campfire, and we're like, well, let's just kick around some names. Like, it's Belize. So we're doing this in Belize. We're going to do research. We're going to do education. We're going to do conservation. We're going to do land protection. We just kicked around words. And are we going to be an institute? Are we going to be a foundation? Are we going to be a society? Are we going to be what are we going to be? And we really weren't sure. So we just kept playing around with the words, literally just sitting around a campfire one night. And at one point it was like, we're going to be an institute of education and research. And so at one point we're like, all right, so we're in Belize. So that's the Belize Institute for Research and Education, which is BFREE. And we're like, wait a minute, that's like a Jamaican sort of Rastafarian term for like, having a great time. So we're like, let's not be BFREE. That's not going to cut it good with the big conservation NGOs and all the funders. So then we ended up with Belize Foundation, because we thought we were actually going to be supporting we wanted to be an organization that supports and facilitates and even help fund all kinds of initiatives. We weren't just about taking, we were about giving. And so foundation came, and then we threw the words together, and it sounded Belize Foundation for Research and Environmental Education, BFREE. That's kind of interesting. A little corny, but maybe it'll stick. And it stuck.
Nice. That's. I mean, that is fascinating, and it's really cool that you. It was solely you. It's.
Well, it wasn't. I can't take all the credit. No, it wasn't. I'm speaking from my experience. So there were lots of other people involved.
Okay.
So I mean, this was my idea, yes, and I was the driver. But I'm not the only one. So at the time, my girlfriend was with me. Some of my old high school buddies came down. When we first moved onto this property, which was March of 95, I had about 3 or 4 friends. A couple from high school, another guy that I met down here, some of my friends from my college days, herp buddies, that came down for a month here, 2 months there, 3 months there. So, I mean, I was not alone. There were a lot of other people that have contributed to and especially over the years, I mean, of course.
Yeah, right. One of my, I don't know, Seth Wanger, is that name ring a bell?
No, but I've forgotten most of everything I've ever known.
Well, he's a professor at UGA, and I spent some time in Costa Rica with him. Mm-hmm. I got on topic of saying I had spent time here. And
yeah.
He had mentioned that he actually helped build the tower early on.
I believe you.
Came out and scouted it out. So I don't know if that, but
I don't remember him, but could have been.
Yeah, well,
I'm not going to argue with him. Yeah.
I mean, it's just testament to how many people have gone into building this place and that sort of thing. I'm curious, just initially, if there's some stories and exploring the property, that sort of thing, that stand out in your mind, and kind of what the events were behind that.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah. I mean, there's endless. So, we've been here in March of 2024. 25, it'll be 30 years since we moved onto the property. So over these years, of course, there's lots of stories. So, I mean, initially exploring the property was challenging because we didn't know where it actually was. There was an old map from 1983 that just had some lines on it. This is, before the days of GPS. This is before the digital age. This is before the internet. So I was able to dig up a map out of the lands department, this piece of paper, and it had a polygon and a little bit of numbers and stuff and some farthings and northings and stuff. It was very hard to know. And there was nothing around here, you have to understand. I mean, not just BFREE. BFREE was just a forest. There was nothing here at all. But nor was the road in barely passable. In fact, we had to chop the last mile and a half to get to the river. And the highway out there was a horrible dirt road. There were half the villages up and down the highway where this was a very, very, very different and remote location. It feels very different than it does now. And so just to get back here was difficult. And so when we first started trying to figure out where the property was, we couldn't find, there were some cement corner posts. We could see that on the map when it was surveyed in '83. There were about 5 or 6 cement posts scattered over this 1,100 acres and along the corners and a few along the lines, but we couldn't find any. I remember crawling around literally on my hands and knees when I thought I was close to the cement post because there was so much bush, right? There's no clearings and of any kind, no trails, nothing. And so I would crawl around on my hands and knees with a machete, just kind of swinging, not so much to chop anything, but the hope that I would hear ding because I'd hit a cement post. I remember doing that a lot. Wow. Actually, it's quite embarrassing. I would not do that now. But at the time, I really had no idea what I was doing. Amazingly, when we first moved onto the property in March of '95, there were some people squatting downriver, some local Mayans that were downriver about 2 miles that were basically just kind of growing some corn and beans and planting a few trees. And there were a couple little thatch huts. They weren't even living there full time. It was like during the season to farm, there were some families down there. And so they were the only humans around here. So we would walk down the river and walk into their village a few times and just see what they had. We were also very, very hungry. It was all just survival in those early days. It was just trying to eat and stay dry and try to find the corner post so we knew where the property was. So we were just sort of camping where we thought the property was, but we weren't sure. One day I'm down there and I run into this, what seemed like a young kid. I guess he was a young teenager. And I said, hey, and they probably thought we were like, who the hell were these white guys like in the middle of nowhere? Because we were just living in tents. I mean, we lived in a tent for about like a year and a half down by the river before we started anything really here. So I find this young Mayan guy just wandering around, and I say, have you ever seen any kind of cement posts here? Anywhere in the forest, anywhere within miles of here? And he said, yeah. I said, really? Can you take me to him? He said, sure. And so I follow him across the river and through the forest, no trails, and he just leads me within about half an hour. He finds a corner post or less. And I was like, oh my God, do you know where there's any others? And he goes, yeah. And then he leads me to a second one. And now I've got 2 posts in a row. So I'm like, okay, this is the beginning of one. And I couldn't believe this guy was, I don't know how he found these things. His name was Tom Pop, who's now our manager of our Hicatee Conservation Research Center. He runs the Hicatee program. So that's how I first met Tom. That was in '95. So I remember that was an interesting adventure, just finding the property. And that still wasn't the end of it, actually. Later on, I brought in some, that same year, once we had these few posts, I brought in a team of surveyors who came back here to actually do the proper resurvey. It was in the middle of rainy season. It was pouring rain, and we were all in tents, and it was very buggy, and all of these guys ended up getting sick within the first week, horribly sick, and decided they were going to leave. They were done here. And we had 1 or 2 canoes. And one day, I remember, they didn't even tell us they were leaving. We were all like, it was different back then. We were all kind of like living a little bit wild. It was pretty wild. And so I just know one morning I went down to the river. Maybe I was already there. I don't remember. And I noticed that a boat was missing. I was like, what? And then I hear some noises and screams, and I get really close to that, and then I look out over the river. The river's raging. not a safe time to cross the river. They had taken one of our boats. They had stripped down, I guess, into their shorts and packed up some of their stuff in buckets and maybe a few bags. And they took my boat across the river, and they were leaving us without a boat, by the way, on our side of the river during rainy season, where the river gets up and down. It's very dangerous. But the boat flipped.
Oh God.
And so they all fell in the river. I don't see this. I see them now just after the boat's flipped. So the boat's gone. All their stuff is gone. And what I see is 4 or 5 guys clinging to like vines and branches and trying to get out of the river during basically a flood, just in their underwear. And what they ended up doing was eventually getting out of the river, and they all hiked out the 6 miles in their underwear, and I never saw them again. Nor did they finish the survey.
That's crazy.
It has nothing to do with turtles.
Well, I mean, yeah.
This was the kind of stuff that happened in those early days. Is hard to even describe. I mean, I could talk for days. Obviously, endless adventures. But exploring the property, so that was just finding the property. But what was so incredible about this place is just just at that time, the forest was really super impressive. Big, huge trees, tons of wildlife. And I was just every step you take was just magical and amazing. It still is. But we had a hurricane come in 2001 that drastically changed the forest structure here, and kind of just everything's kind of been coming back since then for the last 23 years, but it took a lot of damage. But back before Hurricane Iris in 2001, it was definitely like walking in a cathedral. It was incredible. It's starting to come back that way. But anyway, that's a long answer. These are long answers to your questions. I'll try to make them shorter.
No, this is good. I think we like the long answers. Just exploring it's really interesting. I didn't realize that's how you met Tom first. That's a really interesting
First time
story.
I met Tom. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about like the actual development of, I guess, BFREE more of like in an infrastructure way. Was there any like challenges along the road of building it up to what it is now? I guess I'm sure there were. But,
No, absolutely. So well, we're a very remote location, right? So we're 6 miles down a dirt road and across a river. And in the old days, the highway was dirt. There was 160 miles of dirt road before you got to our dirt road to come in. And so, I mean, for the first couple of things we built were a few thatches. Then the first real building was my house, because my wife and I, when we first moved here, we had a 2-month-old. So my wife and I had this little 6-week, 2-month-old baby named Sophia, and we lived in a tent for over a year with this little baby. And so at some point it became like, you know what, maybe we should build a house, because we were the only ones kind of back here. And so so I started building my house. But to get all that lumber back here and to build that house was a kind of perfect example of what's happened over the years. So we would have to plan and order everything at least a year before we were going to build it, because there's a very small window when we could get anything down this road. So the entrance road has sort of been the biggest obstacle, but also at the same time the best sort of barrier for any kind of negative things that could potentially happen around here. So obstacle, because the entrance road, the 6-mile road to BFREE, has historically been really, really, really bad. Like you cannot drive it. Or if you would have to have a very high, big 4-wheel drive vehicle. And I mean, it used to just be, it's a swamp. It used to just be huge ruts. So vehicles, any kind of vehicle that would try to come down the road historically would get stuck, and horribly stuck. We'd have to get a big tractor, a skidder to come get it out. In fact, there were 2 years that our vehicle was no way was going to get down the road, and we got horses. So for 2 years, we had horses as the only transport to go in and out of here. So you can imagine when it comes to infrastructure and building here, you only have about 2.5 months a year when it's dry enough during the dry season, if you then get the road graded, to actually bring anything down. And then you have to get it across the river. And then you got to get it to where it's going. So, I mean, I have 1,000 stories about the challenges of building here. But I guess, and I don't know which even one to tell you. But I mean, there's been times when building supplies, like let's say a tractor is bringing in a flatbed trailer with building supplies and it gets stuck. Remember one time a trailer, literally the axle broke off the trailer and all of the lumber and everything slid into the muck of the clay out in the tropical savanna, and we couldn't get it out, and it sat out there for a year. And I remember at that time we would just walk in and out. We would just walk in and out. In fact, to get groceries, we would walk out to the highway, get on a bus, go south to Punta Gorda, which is an hour south of here, buy some groceries in our backpacks, get on the bus. At the end of the day, come back in, hike in the 6 miles, cook till we're running out of food, and then we do it again. So, I mean, those are the early days. So, like, I guess my point is getting stuff back here is a huge challenge because the road has been so bad. But we also have kept it that way until recently, because if we had fixed the road in the early days, there would be a lot more threats and things to try to mitigate in terms of conservation, because good roads mean access, and access means development. And so we were trying to protect these areas back here, and so keeping really poor, bad access is actually better than a gate. Because someone can break through a gate, but you can't break through 6 miles of mud. And so for decades, for 2 decades, we purposely kept the road really bad, and we learned how to manage it for our own needs without. So we have like specialized trucks, and trucks are breaking down all the time. But so infrastructure is one of the most important things here, because without it, like, we couldn't even be talking right now. Electricity, water, all that stuff. So we've always been solar and off the grid. And whether that's one little panel, I remember like communications. First time we had communications here, there was a trumpet tree. It's kind of over by where the other office is now. I remember climbing up that tree. I cut some short little sticks. I climbed up the tree, nailing the little sticks to it along the way, so there was like a ladder. I got to the top, cut the top off with a machete, so the top of the tree fell down. I had a antenna with a 2-meter VHF radio, put the antenna on top of the tree, ran a cable down to a little 2-meter, sort of almost like CV type radio, a little car battery that I stuck, built this little, the back of my truck, actually the camper of the truck back then, I took it off and I put that up on some sticks, and that was like the only dry place here except their tent, the tents that you'd sleep in, and plugged it in, and we were able to communicate with this little VHF transmitter. I borrowed one little solar panel from a friend of mine and put that up on the tree too, nailed that up to the tree. So that was our communications for like a year. So things have evolved over time.
Right.
We've adapted, and but yeah, I mean, even today, like for our butane or propane delivery, it's once a year. It's during usually April, after things dry up a lot. It's dry season. We'll get the road graded. Then we have to go down to the river, and everyone that works here spends like 3 days moving rocks around so that we can make the bed of the river drivable. That's a lot of work. We do it in like layers, big rocks, smaller rocks, and then like pebbles. We do it with buckets and shovels and by hand. And then then the rivers, you can cross the river, and then we call the butane people, and they drive down the road, and they drive up, and they fill up all the tanks for the whole year until next April. We're still doing that.
That's awesome. It's just all the different logistical hurdles.
Logistics.
You need to be really ingenuitive to sort of figure out adaptation for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk a bit about. I mean, you went at least a decade doing other sorts of work, and then I guess concurrently while you were here, there were some surveys going on for the Hicatee across Belize, initiated by, or at least run by, Dr. Rainwater and his crew. And so at some point, all of that kind of came together, and the Dramatides work was sort of pushed here and to some extent. I'm just kind of curious how that collaboration evolved and where the Dermatomes kind of came into BFREE.
Okay, so what the way it started was that Rick Hudson, who's the founder, and he's the founder of TSA, and I guess previous president for all these decades. There's also an old friend of mine. I knew him from the 90s, or the 80s even. I met him during my zoo days in the late 80s when he was at Fort Worth Zoo. And I actually worked at Dallas Zoo for a little while in the reptile department there. So we started hanging out. And so we became friends. And then just a few years later, that was 1988 to 1990, kind of in there. A few years later, I moved to Belize and disappeared, and no one ever really heard from me again in the States. I pretty much dropped off the map. And then, but Rick somehow heard that I was down here years and years and years later, and reached out to me through a friend of mine, and said he wanted to talk to me. So I got on the phone with Rick Hudson. That was probably 2009 or 10. And he said, Jake, what do you know about what's happening with Dermatomes in Belize? And I said, nothing. I don't really know anything, and I don't think anything's happening. And I'd been doing herp work down here, right, and other things. I mean, I was running BFREE, but there was nothing really going on. Very, very little going on. So, at least not since the early 90s when John Polishar was working down here. So he said, well, we've been trying to get a project off in Mexico, but it's not really working out, and so I'm really curious about Belize, so let me come down and visit you. And I said, come on down. So Rick came on down. That was probably 2009 or 10. And we spent, 4 or 5 days together. And I don't really remember, maybe just a couple days together. Anyway, we chatted, and he was like, well, I think what I want to do, and I introduced him to some different people. So I drove him around and introduced him to people that were sort of like-minded. And he was like, I think what I want to do is I want to do a survey because we don't know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on in terms of the population of the country, clearly. And I was like, right. So he was like, I think I'm going to bring in Thomas Rainwater. Because I knew Thomas Rainwater did his PhD here on crocs in northern Belize. And before him, Steve Platt did his PhD here on Morlets. And when Steve was down here, I worked with Steve. So I didn't know Thomas at the time, but Steve and Thomas were good buddies. So anyway, there's this little group of us, and so Rainwater said he could do it because he was familiar with working in rivers and lagoons, doing croc work in Belize. And so Rainwater, we started chatting, and Rainwater said, well, who do you recommend I have as my field? I need a field team. Can you help me with logistics? I said, of course. I know lots of people. So I hooked Rainwater up with Tom Popp because Tom is a great field biologist and like parabiologist, and I'd worked with him at BFREE and all kinds of projects. He'd worked with lots of different researchers already because he'd already been working at BFREE on and off for a number of years. Jaguars, birds, fish, all kinds of stuff. So, and he's such a good field person. So I hooked Tom up with Thomas Rainwater and Tom. So the two Toms, and then there was a third person that I connected them with. So they had a team of 3. Thomas Rainwater was the lead, and then 2 Belizeans as their field assistants. And so they came down. We got it all set up, and then Thomas did his thing with the guys, and they did 2 or 3 months of field work. And after that field research and the results that Rainwater got, then Rick, we all had a conversation, and Rick said, well, clearly we have to do something. And so what do you think we should do? I said, well, the first thing we should do is we should have a workshop. We should bring in government. We should bring in academics. We should bring in some of the people that actually know anything about turtles, which is very few. And so we actually, BFREE and TSA, along with the Fisheries Department, hosted a workshop that first happened at the Belize Fisheries Department. That was like 2011, maybe, right after Rainwater's survey in 2010. And then we had another one maybe in the next year in Belmopan. So it was a lot of this, like I was just trying to bring everybody together down here. And TSA, Rick was like, okay, well, I think at this point we know the populations are severely depleted in certain areas. Some places they're completely extirpated. few other places they maybe aren't so bad, but the rainwater survey was just the tip of the iceberg. It was a quick but effective study that gave us some idea what was going on. So then Rick was like, I want to set up somewhere to have an assurance colony to hedge extinction and maybe do some research and some breeding. Let's look at the feasibility of breeding this in captivity, because sometimes that can be a valuable piece of a conservation program. So he came back down, and I drove him around Belize again, and we met with different places. We went to the Belize Zoo, we met with some private people, fisheries department again, whatever. And because I didn't want to do it here. My background's in herpetology, and that's all great, and I knew how to breed things. I bred tons of stuff, but I didn't particularly want to do it here at the time, because I thought it was going to be honest with you, I didn't like the idea of any animals in any kind of cages. That this was a wilderness area, and I wanted to not actually have fences and cages, and that's just not a zoo. But after spending a lot of time trying to figure out a place to do this, because I couldn't find one, I didn't feel confident that anyone was going to be able to pull this off. And so in the end, I sort of succumbed, and I said, all right, let's do it here. Let's just go for it. Right. And so that's how we decided to do the project here. So we were involved from the early inception of the idea. And then lots of things happened over the years. Obviously, there's been workshops, there's been training, there's been all kinds of things, and eventually the program has gotten to where it is now.
Right, and it's been over a decade at this point that it's sort of been initiated. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what the highlights in terms of research or things that you've learned about the Hicatee have been through doing this work.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what's so fascinating about every species is unique. What's so fascinating about this species is that it seems to have a lot of its physiology, its sort of natural history. It's just so ancient. It is the last living representative of this 65 million year old, family of species. It's monotypic and all that. But there's just things about it I just don't understand. I mean, not only does it not bask, but it never comes up on land. I mean, and when they nest, most of the time they don't even come up on land. Sometimes they do. They just come right to the water's edge and dig right there on the edge. Sometimes they lay their eggs underwater in nests. Sometimes they'll come up a couple feet or a meter. This is a very much a fully aquatic turtle. Embryonic diapause, TSD, strictly herbivorous. They get huge. They don't bask. They breathe. They have multiple ways that they're getting oxygen, both through in their organ, or highly vascularizing, get oxygen there, as well as breathing normally. And I think they probably get some oxygen from, I think they're butt breathers too. They just have so many things that make them they check all the boxes for a weird turtle, for a cool turtle, for a turtle that somehow survived all this time. But with really also a very small range. I mean, so there's a lot of things about this turtle that are really interesting to me. I worry about their future, not just because of that they're heavily hunted for meat, because it's human consumption that's driving their numbers, that have been driving their numbers so incredibly low. But I also really worry about climate, because they have temperature, sex, determination, and because they lay right on the water's edge, and because there's so much extreme climate events happening with droughts, floods, heat, cool, water levels changing. It seems like they're a turtle that's kind of, their natural history, their biology seems like they're a little sensitive to dramatic change, maybe slow change over time, but like we're already seeing a lot of changes in weather patterns here that we've been taking weather data, climate data here for 30 years. We're already seeing a lot of pretty significant changes in rainfall and temperature and many things. So I'm a little concerned about not just the direct human impacts of over harvesting for meat, but climate, giving this turtle that it could be very sensitive to climate change in terms of their ability to reproduce successfully.
Yeah. So a lot of this work is sort of ex situ conservation, and I think the ultimate goal is to kind of take that full circle and make it in situ conservation.
Absolutely.
And in order to do that successfully, I mean, going back to work from Peter Pritchard and even before that, you have to involve local communities and that sort of thing. And you're working in a place where there's a rich culture around this animal. So how does kind of the initiative BFREE does incorporate local knowledge and communities and understanding these turtles, and what's the ultimate goal with the future of this project?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this project I would call it successful if one, there were at least a handful, if not more, wild populations of this species that were, robust, healthy, in 3 or 4 different, at least, half a dozen different sort of habitat types, closed systems, open systems, rivers, lagoons, different parts of the country that were self-sustaining, robust, healthy populations. Like, we don't have that right now. We have populations that are not robust, and most of the adults are removed, are having a hard time, becoming more stable because they're so heavily. So that would be one definition of success. If this project ended, that would be a definition of success because we wouldn't need it anymore. Yeah. So like when we shut this place down, that'll hopefully, in my mind, that'll be great. We've done our job. We don't need a breeding center anymore. Involving local communities it's more than that. It's not just involving local communities. Like it's people taking ownership of their own and people being responsible and taking ownership of their own planet and their own backyard. So it's not about but it's challenging, right? So yeah, we have a big outreach and education component. We're training lots of local Belizeans. We're helping them become knowledgeable about the species. They can do research, and all that's great. Bottom line, though, it's the person, it's the family that's living by the riverside or near the lagoon that wants their river to run clear, and for there to be things like turtles in it and fish, and that the riverine forest is standing, living in a place that's healthy and green, and keeping out, and preventing like deforestation, gravel mining, river dredging, overfishing, overpoaching. So it's really about helping people see the value in what they have, and so that takes a lot of energy and time. But really, what it takes is it takes generations, but it's mostly an educational thing. It's mostly about education. So like doing research in the field on the species is super important so we can understand more about its just biology and physiology, natural history, and all those things. Super important. But what's most important, more than that, is helping people interact with and think about and care about their natural world differently. That it's not just something to extract, but it's something to care for. Doesn't matter, you could research it into oblivion, but if there's nothing to research, it's because the other piece hasn't happened. Especially in a place like Belize, where it's like that everywhere. But Belize has a diversity of cultures here, and so most of the harvesting of the species occurs in central and northern Belize and a little bit in extreme southern Belize. What we're doing about it, as best as we can, is we are doing a lot of outreach and education programs in schools. Like, we work with over 500 schools. We've had, we reach, we do social media stuff. We get on TV shows. We do documentaries. We hand out T-shirts and pamphlets and all the kind of swag and all the kind of education outreach you would imagine anyone would do. They were trying pretty hard with any kind of species or conservation or communities of species or any kind of conservation project. You've got to do all of those pieces. And so we do that. And it's super important. I mean, the other thing that we do is a program where we're taking young Belizeans that are interested in conservation, that have some formal education, at least associate degree, and we're giving them the opportunity to come back here and work for 2 years and get paid and really become experts in the field through our Science and Education Fellowship Program. And so those people, those Belizeans, kind of become mentors, they become role models, they become leaders, because it's really all about the people. I mean, it's saving, let's say, ensuring that the Hicatees here for generations in perpetuity is about working with people. And for a lot of us that get into conservation, we're coming out of it because we probably don't really like to deal with people that much. They're interested in the animals. I get it. I'm one of those too. But I've had to learn the other side to it, because it's the people that are making choices that affect what happens to our wilderness and the organisms that live in it. So this is nothing new. Everybody knows this. I'm just sharing that it's certainly the case here. What's so interesting in Belize is that because it's still, it was 160,000 people in the whole country when I came here in '86. Now it's 2024. There's about 420,000 people, so it's almost tripled, not quite, in almost 40 years. But there's still a tiny population of people here. Belize is a small country the size of New Hampshire. It's manageable. And so we're able to have a huge impact on our conservation programs at BFREE, not just the Hicatee program, but that as an example, because the population is relatively small and people live mostly in cities and towns. There's some rural population as well, but you can reach tens of thousands of Belizeans. You can reach a third of the population. There's only 2 or 3 TV channels. It's not like the States. So you can have a big impact. You'll sort of a lot of bang for the buck, which is one of the things about what I love working in this country, is because I feel like we started with a little tent down by the river with a great and grandiose kind of idea. We're here 30 years later, and I feel like we're making a difference.
The fellowship aspect is just a really cool thing. I think that just, like you said, kind of it's all about the people and giving opportunities and that sort of thing. And just conversations I've had with past fellows, it's like these people are motivated. It's like at a global stage, it's just the resources, give them the resources, and they'll change the future. So it's and pave the path for the future. And it's really cool that you're giving those opportunities to become an expert and to think about these things. In the place where a lot of this is occurring, and it's a really cool thing. Maybe we could sort of, because we're going to talk to some of the past and current fellows in a bit, but maybe we could kind of go into, you do a lot of other research here, and we don't have time to cover all of that, but there's got to be some highlights. I'm curious what some of the research highlights have been.
Well, to me, it's all about integration. So, there's been countless research programs that have occurred here, everything from studying slime molds, land snails, to harpy eagles, jaguars, and everything in between. So, but the integration of research with all these other components, to me, has sort of been the highlight. So, developing a program where there's research taking place. Belizeans aren't just part of it, but they become the researchers. They are driving the research program. So it's not just some foreigners coming down, doing some stuff, getting their masters and leaving. And what do they leave behind? Nothing. But unless that master's or PhD student is working with the Belizean researchers, they're helping train them, and then they take it on, and then maybe it continues even after that master's or PhD student from the outside leaves. But it's the integration of research and then also doing educational programming and conservation, which is not either of those two things. Conservation is a separate type of activity. It's when we can integrate all those things together that we have the most dynamic and successful projects. And I'll just touch on go back to the Hicatee for just a minute, because like right now with our program, there's many pieces to this program. What happens here at BFREE at the center is just one aspect. But like for me to also see the successful, what would come out of another sort of definition of success for this program with research with Hicatee is actually for it to become an accepted, known sort of emblematic species for watershed conservation. So when people are talking about rivers and watersheds, what's the species that can best sort of we can utilize and talk about and give examples of? It's the Hicatee. And I see that's where this program is going, is sort of using the Hicatee as an umbrella species, emblematic species, whatever, to focus on large watershed conservation programs. Because like the same thing with like landscapes, people use like jaguars for landscapes, or the mountain lion because of their huge home range. So when they do large corridors and stuff like that, howler monkey is monkeys are a good one for like forests. Harp eagles. So one of our really interesting programs was when we rediscovered harp eagles, which is the largest raptor in the Americas. You know, these things turn 3 feet tall. They have talons larger than bear claws, and they eat things like deer and monkeys and wild pigs. These are large birds. And people are afraid of them because they're afraid they'll come down and grab their kids right out of the village and fly off with them. So there's a fear of harp eagles that's ingrained in a lot of local people. It was 2003 or 4, and an expedition up to the Bladen Nature Reserve that we were on, where we saw a bird in a tree and didn't know what the hell it was, and it ended up being took pictures and ended up being a juvenile harpy eagle, which I hadn't thought to have been around here. And so that led to a long 10-year program of rediscovering these harpy eagles, finding adults, finding the first nest ever known to occur in Belize, and we ended up discovering this population of harpies 1,000 miles north of their known range, which we studied for years, and it ended up being a documentary, award-winning film. We had a huge outreach and education program. We trained like 15 local Belizeans to become avian technicians and biologists. Did all kinds of advocacy for protected areas conservation with the government. It became a whole complex, coordinated program with lots of funders. We also did a massive long-term study of all the entire bird community in the Bladen Nature Reserve and at BFREE, which led to large donors and U.S. government involvement and Nature Conservancy and Disney and National Geographic, and all because we found this one bird. And we turned it into this huge integrated program. As we're talking about integration, it became this big program with all of these different things that came out of it, because of a bird. That's how I think about the Hicatees. It's a turtle. It's just one species of turtle. But that's like, for me, that's the vision I see, is how it's taking this turtle, and we're going. This is where this program's heading. It's heading in this direction. When, you know, one of the goals is like to have local community members, like to develop a whole river keeper system for this country, which I see this is going to happen, where local villages that live along these rivers and lagoons throughout Belize, where the Hicatee occur, become the stewards of these rivers. They get trained. A lot of them already are, but they just need more support, like you were talking about, so that we have integrated, coordinated system of keepers, river keepers, and the Hicatee would benefit from that, along with everything else. So anyway, you talked like what are some exciting research programs? The harpy eagle was quite incredible. Working with that bird, it's a needle in the haystack. I mean, my God, we spent months and months and months and months and months in the field trying to find these birds and climbing up on these ridges, and it was crazy. It was crazy. People breaking arms, falling off cliffs. But in the end, it was fine.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's been one of the more significant, I think, research programs.
I can imagine.
Or conservation programs.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, kind of what you mentioned, I guess, specifically using the Hicatees as an example of what BFREE is meant to be, which is, we can throw as many captive bred juvenile Hicatee into a river to take pressure off populations, but what really needs to happen is a cultural shift and change of attitude towards our natural resources and wildlife, and I think that's more so what's trying to be accomplished here.
Absolutely, you said it very perfectly well. So yeah, I mean that's exactly right. So the breeding program here is, I think, one of the best. I mean, you nailed it. That is exactly right. The one of the real benefits I see of this breeding program here isn't even actually releasing the turtles. What I see is a species that's very, very, very difficult to study in the wild because of all of its behaviors and its habits, where it occurs. So actually having this facility here with semi-wild conditions, outside, has actually allowed us to collect a tremendous amount of data and do observational data and other types of data, and we're learning a lot about the species' natural history and nesting and all these things that I think in the wild would be almost impossible to do. So that's what I'm seeing is really coming out of the benefits of this facility. We've got, 150 clutches or thousands of eggs and hatchlings now. So, I mean, the numbers are big, but the numbers allow us to really have a lot of data to look much more, our data sets are really good now. So we're learning tons about age of sexual maturity and courtship and breeding. I mean, a lot of the information we've learned here is actually going towards a revision of the laws and regulations for the species, because when the laws and regulations were written back in the 2003, it was based on almost no good knowledge of the species. And so a lot of what we learned here is actually, the fisheries department has asked for it, and so we're putting it together. We're in the sort of getting close to putting together this revision, this recommendations for revision based on what we know now. Because what we know now is the nesting season is way wider than what was known previous. We know when courtship occurs. We know when mating occurs. We know if you want to preserve the species, we know the windows that you really shouldn't be removing the animals if you want the species to persist. So our a lot of the information for the recommendations for changing the laws and regulations is come out of the work that we've done here. So that's just an example, right? Yeah, releasing hundreds of thousands of hatchlings back into the wild is great, but like you say, if people don't change how they interact with these rivers and lagoons, unless they perceive and care about and think about differently what they're doing, leaving these turtles to live out their natural lives, and if the laws and regulations can change and a whole bunch of other things, then there's hope. So yeah, it's a multi-pronged, multi-faceted project. It has to be.
Right. Well, so out of all your experiences working here and elsewhere, you've got just a tremendous amount of stories, and I'm curious, out of all those stories, what stands out the most in terms of wildlife encounters, and the most riveting, or the one that just comes to mind?
Wow. It's a tough one. Well, okay, so I remember, one time I was coming in the entrance road and I saw a jaguar and a mountain lion within 15 minutes of each other. That was pretty nice. But that's just an observation. I think back when we used to do a lot of big expeditions up into the mountains here. Go up there for 10 days, 2 weeks at a time. And I think some of those experiences were the most memorable. Like, I'm hiking. Sometimes I'm not necessarily by myself as like a team of us, but we get separated. We may be going on a long hike that day or whatever, and we're not always in a tight pack. So I remember multiple kinds of experiences where I'm hiking along, and the trails are very narrow, or not even narrow. They're barely trails.
Yeah, right.
We would just take a branch and bend it forward in the direction that we would go, and that's how we used to mark the trails here. And I just remember, like, one time I stopped. I know something was not right, and I smell wild, what's called wari, which is a peccary, wild pigs here. And wari are pretty aggressive, and they will chase and have been known to kill people. And I see they're coming through, and I see them, and then I realize they're all around me. And then I see there's hundreds of them. And there's these big bull males that would, 2 or 3 of them, usually there were a lot of them. They were all around me, and there was no one else around. I was like, crap, I'm just quiet. And they're patting, they're grunting, and they're clapping their big tusks. And they're around me. And then the big male just stands right over there, not 30 feet from me, and he's basically, I know what he's doing. He's trying to scare the crap out of me. So all the other hundreds of pigs go by, because they were moving. That's what they do. They roam. And then he'd run at me and stop. Like run 5 feet and stop. And so there's been other times when this has happened when we've climbed trees to get away from these animals. But there were no trees like conveniently around me that I was going to climb. They're big trees, but no low branches. So and that's happened more than once when I felt really concerned. Hundreds of these things. So that I remember some of those experiences are just really memorable. But I've also had experiences where, like, I'm just walking in the forest and there's some spider monkeys, and it's beautiful, right? And then there's some more, and then I realize that all the trees are shaking, and there's hundreds and hundreds of spider monkeys passing. Not like, normally you don't see that. You'll see 5 or 10 monkeys, but hundreds, and it's just absolutely magical to think that there's that much. And that's what it's like up the river here. You see hordes of wildlife, hundreds of coatis, hundreds of peccary, or hundreds of spider monkeys. So some of those experiences are really memorable, and it just shows the health and abundance and the unspoiled state of some of these Maya mountains around here. Those actually, like, when I really, I could tell you about some specific experiences, crazy snake stories, jaguar stories. There's so much stuff that, like, people, like, the things, the close calls, like, I can't tell you. I just had one this morning, a close call with a fur lance. But the things that are most memorable are the things that just remind me just how magical places like this are when they're intact and unspoiled.
That's awesome. I think that's a kind of a powerful note to end on, right? That's the stuff that makes it worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I think we can sort of wrap this section up. If there's anything else you'd like to add and go into, certainly open the floor to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, no, I think I appreciate the interest. BFREE is just we're really just trying to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We're trying to save this little piece of paradise back here in southern Belize, trying to make a difference throughout the whole country as well, and interacting with people from all over the world. hopefully we can touch people to help inspire them to care for this planet. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, what language you speak, what color you are, where you come from. We're all just human beings, really. If people just identified as human beings first, and then everything else maybe down the road later, I think this planet would be better off and everyone in it. So yeah, so yeah, we're just trying to do our part, and yeah, thanks for the interest in learning about us, and we're gonna just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sitting down with us, and yeah, this has been really awesome just to hear about the history and the future goals with a lot of the Dermatome's work and the stories. So thanks.
Thank you guys.
This is our second part to the BFREE interview, CheloniaCast episode 66. We're really fortunate to be joined by Barney, Heather, Jonathan, and Tom today to add some more to what we've discussed and talked about, and to get all of their experiences working at BFREE, and just to hear more about what they've learned here and kind of their overall experience. So take it away.
Yeah, so we always start this way, just kind of your background of how you got interested in turtles or conservation. So I guess we can go left to right, starting with Barney here, just kind of, how you found yourself where you are now with turtles and stuff.
So the way I got involved was really an opportunity. I've always grown up at the Belize River, but when I came to work at BFREE, that's the first time I really got to have a hands-on experience with the Hicatee. And I questioned myself. I was like, turtles? And then I guess it grew in me. Like, I started learning about the physiology of these turtles and just how incredible they are. And then, like, just meeting different turtle enthusiasts and getting their perspective, and like, they're really incredible. And like, I developed a love for turtles through this program.
Awesome. Heather, if you want to
Okay.
learn a little about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I started work with BFREE in 2011 as really helping the administrative side of the organization, which has been my main role throughout. And so I worked in the States. At that time, the turtle project was still it wasn't even developed with BFREE yet. And my background is not at all in conservation or biology. So as the project has grown, I've learned more about turtles, and so my interest really came from my work. So in 2014, when the facility was established, I saw my first Hicatee when they were collected and brought here. So it's been just a tremendous learning experience for me, and then because of that, I've gained interest in other turtles as well.
Awesome. Jonathan, how about you?
So when I was younger, I used to always visit my grandma's farm. And, her farm was more like a natural setting. We had a creek running and a lot of trees because she liked trees and all that stuff. So I used to visit when I was younger. So I was always intrigued by nature, so that kind of sparked the conservation passion that I've developed throughout the years. But I eventually studied natural resource management at my junior college, and at that junior college is where I got an opportunity to come to BFREE on a field trip, and I did that in 2019, I believe. So that was my first time really finding out a bit about BFREE, and I grew up in Independence, and based on our geography in Belize, that region isn't really known for Hicatee historically. So I didn't really know anything about Hicatee until I came to BFREE on that field trip, and then of course it was always interesting to me, and eventually down the line I let that interest continue to develop, and then I got an opportunity to work in the Hicatee program, and I did that from 2020, like mid-COVID, like peak COVID, and for 2 years, I was a Hicatee fellow, working with the Hicatee program here at BFREE.
That's awesome. How about you, Tom? How did you sort of get your start with the an interest in turtles?
Well, good question. It was started for a job, I guess. I was working in BFREE before we did the countrywide survey, doing Hicatee survey with Thomas Rainwater. I think that took place in 2012, somewhere around there, 2013. With that countrywide survey, I don't really know the Hicatee as well. I never seen one. I've seen other turtles, but I don't know what they call. So I become interested in turtle while we did the Hicatee survey, but I just don't know how to step in the game. But luckily, like I said to myself, I wish one day I would be a person involving with turtle as well. I was involved in a lot of destroying forests, but when I learn about turtle, that I see traveling all over the country with seeing the river and riparian forests, they are getting destroyed. So one of my interests is to be with the turtle to try see how we can keep the captive Hicatee in here and then try to breed them. That was one of my interests. And then the other one is to, because I hear people talking about until 16 years to get matured for them to start lay their eggs. So that's one of my interests too, that I really want to see that happen here in BFREE. So I become, Jacob called me. He actually called me, talked to me at Bella Vista about the project, because he went to collect our first 22 Hicatee in Sibun, and we don't know who's going to take care of them, but we have our turtle at that time. So I wasn't working here at BFREE, but I was working before then, but I left about 2 years and a half, and then I think Jacob trying to find someone, and then but his mind probably like is like thinking about me too, so he in touch with me, and then I decided, because I wanted to be involved with the turtle, so I said yes to start work with the turtle. So in 2014 I become fully in charge with taking care of the facility, and up to now. So this turtle I've been with the journey with them with a lot of things. So with all of that, I learned what could happen to these turtle, and I learned what they eat the most. So that's how I became involved. And the last but not least, I just want to see them to start to nest in next 6 years time. So when I see that happen, that will be maybe my end retirement.
Yeah, and if I can add, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So when the project was starting, like I said, I started in 2011, and the idea of having a captive breeding facility here was still very new. And Rick Hudson and Jacob Marlin were having lots of conversations about what that could look like and how to build the ponds. And so those first couple of years were very much about just establishing the ponds and thinking about how those were constructed, that they could hold water. There were lots of issues. Building in the middle of a jungle a captive facility was not something we'd ever done before, and we don't have any other captive animals here. So it took a lot of planning and thought. And then around 2014, when the facility was opening, we knew we needed a manager. And Jacob immediately said, I want to ask this guy Tom Pop. And I'd never met Tom at that point. And I said, okay, well, why? What is it that is so special about Tom? And he said, well, for one, he participated in this initial countrywide survey with Thomas Rainwater, and that he was incredible in the field. But also, if you meet anyone here, any researcher who comes through, they'll always say they want to work with Tom. Tom has an amazing ability to observe and respond to his observations. He's very interested in nature and very aware of nature. And so we went to look for Tom, and that's when he said we found him in Bella Vista. We gave him, actually, I think it was 2 copies of the TSA magazines that you were in related to the countrywide survey. So the first time I met Tom was at a speed bump in Bella Vista where we're like flagging him down and handing magazines out a window. And he's like, thanks for the magazines. Yeah, I'm interested in working with turtles. And so it was just kind of a really cool start. And then from that, he became the manager of the facility, and kind of been not looked back since then.
Yeah, it's really been a challenge of working with the turtle when you don't know what could actually happen to the turtle. You think everything will run smooth, but there's always a challenge in turtle health. So, but we learn as we move along because we don't know turtle. If we grow up from day one growing up with the turtle, then we will understand more about the turtle. But luckily now we are 10 years old, trying to learn more about the Hicatee. But still we're not there yet. We still need to learn more about these guys.
That's awesome. With something Jacob talked about a bit was just really early on, and he'd mentioned when he first met you, Tom, that you helped him find the boundary of the preserve, and that's how you guys first met. I'm just curious, what did you think initially at that moment?
It's about 2 miles downstream. We there one guy named Mr. Palma, his title. He says that he's fighting for a piece of land where people can settle down, but we are not too sure. But we wanted to go into a new places. So we asked him if we can go. So he said, well, all what you need to do is pay your entrance fee. So we did pay that, and then we went and started to live there, but we don't know if the place is available. So we are there, and we came in first before Jacob started the area BFREE. It's about a month. We are 1 month old in the new place downstream when Jacob showed up. We don't know if the Bleeding Nature Reserve is a reserve at that time. We don't know. So people usually go to hunt there. So we actually see Jacob while we hunting. When we went, we didn't see anything, but when we come back, we saw a tent, everything that's there is very new, and we try to not to walk where he is, and then we just avoid him. So we didn't know if that was Jacob then. So a couple months later, Jacob showed up by where we living. It's called the Chunbank area. He showed up, and then I don't know what I was doing. I looked like I was wandering around in the area where we living, and then Jacob showed up with another guy. He looks crazy too, but I mean crazy for wildlife. He run after lizard, after snake. So and that they just surprised me seeing them what a lizard could be like. You are so crazy for to try and catch a lizard. That is just funny for me. I just standing there staring at them what they're doing. And then Jacob come to me. He started talking. And he introduced himself, and then I told him my name too. And then he asked, "Do you know where I can find a corner post?" He said. It's like a cement post. That's what he said. Don't you see it around here? But I am a person that like to explore a lot in the forest. So sometimes I go with machete, sometimes I don't go with machete because I don't like to chop anything. I just move like the wildlife. So I remember seeing a cement post, like it's like right there on the big tree base. It's like it, it's going into the tree body, like it's sealing up with that tree. Then I told him, yes, I remember seeing one. Then right away he said, can you show me? Yeah, sure. You ready now? Then we just pick up from there. I went and showed him everything. Then he marked the area. Now, when he hired the surveyor to survey the whole property, they came in, but Jacob could not find the corner post. So he did tell the surveyor to go look for me in Golden Stream, and they did. But that time when we showed up by the river, it was a big flood that time. The water is way far in the forest. We swim all the way to the corner post. Only where the corner post is, that's like a little mound. That's the only post showing up. All around it is water. And on our way back, we struggled to cross back, but we did. So then they surveyed the whole property. That's the time when we met the first time, me and Chico. That was
Oh.
why.
It's cool to see like both perspectives, to see where that partnership began. That's really cool.
Yeah, I did not know if I was going to be in this area property, but I was like working up north Orange Walk area, and I wasn't expecting to end up in this area. But I love the forest. The forest is one of the area where I feel like I want to pass out, because the forest just give me peace, especially climbing a mountain, staying there for overnight. I just feel peaceful. I enjoy the forest, fresh air, everything. So, but thinking on behind now that I work for a logging company, but I destroy a lot of big trees. That time I don't know what's the background behind destroying all of those big trees, but now I realize that I did something wrong, but also giving some chance to some seedlings that needed to grow too. So maybe I did a little bit both. But yeah, one of my passion is turtle now, so I cannot change, and all the wildlife here now I really need to see it and how they could become more and more around us. That's one of my passion to see. But if that happened, that would be a miracle.
That's awesome. Yeah, the conservation aspect of things, and right to see everything come full circle. Um, I'm curious. Maybe we can start with. I think it's good to mention. Jonathan had mentioned he's a past Hicatee fellow, and Barney is current, about to have graduate, and then there's some new folks in the really awesome program that we again talked a bit with Jacob about. But maybe we can start with Jonathan, Barney. But I'm curious what you guys have learned about the Hicatees that's most interesting to you guys, and then we can go to Heather and Tom. But yeah, just anything through your experience with them.
Oh man, so it's hard to say one thing in particular, because like I mentioned, I didn't know what a Hicatee was. I knew it was some sort of turtle or something because I've heard people mention it, but as as far as any information goes, that's all I knew. It was a turtle. I didn't know if it was like a sea turtle or
Yeah.
I didn't know anything until I came to Be Free, and then it was actually on the field trip I came. It was Jaren who was the Hicatee fellow at the time, so he did the tour for us, and he talked to us about Hicatee, and then you know after working with Hicatee for 2 years, some of the real interesting facts that I've learned was that this turtle in particular is very aquatic. Like it spends most of its life underwater. That's why it's like kind of rare to see. After you learn that it doesn't even come out to bask.
Yeah.
So then that leaves a question like, what does it do for temperature regulation and all that stuff? it lays its egg like under the water, like at the riverbank under the water. Like everything for this turtle is water.
Yeah.
So why is it not a fish? Something like that. Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things for me. Like it's how it adapted over millions of years to like fully be um, under the waters, and the way it moves under the water as well, because it has web feet, specially designed to swim the way they do, and they can absorb oxygen from the water column and all of that stuff. When they don't have gills, they have highly vascularized organs and stuff that can help absorb those oxygen. Yeah, learning all of that stuff was very interesting to me because I've never heard of anything like that. So
It almost is a sea turtle, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Barney? What?
Wow. So, growing up, I lived close to the river, about half a mile. I've always been on the river. That's been a part of my childhood, and I've seen Hicatee, but um, like I never understood them or knew anything about them much. I've been around people when I was young that have captured them, like as a bycatch, and I got to witness them taking it home at a young age. And I was a part, like being on the river, I saw people harvesting them, and I saw their techniques that they use, and I never understood it because I was very young. I just watched on. I'm just there with a piece of hand line trying to catch a small fish at that age, and like I hear big sounds in boats, and I'm like, what kind of technique is that? Like, what are you doing? And in my later coming here at BFREE now, like understanding, wow, like this is why the Hicatee is critically endangered. This is a movement to save them, and like relating that to my real world experience. And like I didn't know how much I learned about the Hicatee like until I was out on the river with my friends and we caught one, and it was when he said, let's do a video about the Hicatee. And we just talked about the Hicatee for like 10 minutes, mentioning like what Jonathan was speaking about, or about their physiology and just being highly aquatic and secretive. And like they were like, how do you know all this? And I told them that I work at this breeding facility. I've always told them, but I guess I never explained things to them. And they were like, you get paid for this, like doing this turtle research work and stuff like that. And then I mentioned like research that we do as well, and like being out in the wild surveying them. And they were like, wow, we didn't even know that was happening in Belize and anything like that. And that just inspired me a lot more, because this is my environment, this is the people I get to work with, and I was just more passionate about learning, and I just really hope to do something more with the Hicatee, even if it's just movement tracking or something more. And like I wouldn't have that without this opportunity, like that mindset. I would have just been on the river watching them around and be like, oh, a Hicatee turtle, that's it.
I think like when we look at the Hicatee facility, I guess this is a question for any of you. With like the future outlook for the species and stuff, do you think for the Hicatee program there's a future plans, or is it more so to continue the way it has been going? Is there going to be a change in conservation strategies perhaps, or how do you guys see things evolving?
We've definitely been talking about that and thinking about it as the facility has met capacity, and it's kind of over capacity in a lot of ways, and then and we're trying to find good ways to release them more quickly, but there's a lot of information we still don't have, and so we've talked a lot about what's our carrying capacity and what are those numbers, and how long is this program important to continue. So no, I do believe that the program is going to continue to evolve based on the research that we find from not only our team, but from like Day Ligon's team at the Savannah Field Station. I think we're gathering more partners, we're gaining more information, and we're going to be responsive to that. So we're not just going to continue to do what we've been doing without knowing what those results are. So we're still gathering information, I would say, but trying to remain flexible.
Yeah, so there's still like a lot to learn just about the species, and obviously we were talking about this earlier with Jacob, like it's great to introduce hatchlings or juveniles into the wild, but long term there's more work that needs to be done because
Right.
we depleted the resource and it will just continue no matter how many we put in.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I to continue that, if I were to answer Michael's question from earlier, the thing that I've been most amazed by with learning about this species is how little is still known. And pretty much every single thing we've discovered here is kind of brand new information. I mean, we have some diet studies, there's some historic knowledge, but since it has never bred well in captivity, every single thing that we've done, we've kind of done learning along the way. I mean, from the first eggs that hatched without knowing we would get turtles, and then suddenly getting a lot of turtles. But I mean, even that first year when we had hatchlings, Jacob is a herpetologist, so he had experience, but not with this species. And so that we just are continually asking and trying to answer questions. And we found ourselves asking as many experts as we could, and we kept getting the answer that you'll have to figure it out. These are what we know based on this, and this is a similar species, but we don't have this information for Hicatee. And at first that was really frustrating because we thought, well, somebody should know about, there's all these experts in the world about, on various turtle and tortoise species. But not anyone who knew a lot about Hicatee or about this one. And so, I mean, even from like knowing they're completely herbivorous and having sort of diet studies in the wild, we're trying to replicate that and feed based on the vegetation we have here at BFREE. And that first year, we're feeding them cocoa yam and banana leaves, and they loved it. But then all of a sudden they were floating sideways because they were gassy. And we were like, oh, regroup. And I would say lots of things have been like that. And so we've gone from knowing very little to knowing a lot, and really Tom and Jacob, and I mean, we're all sort of experts in our own way. And that's been a kind of incredible journey over the past 10 years.
It takes a team effort for sure. Just all these different, and even the collaboration, the amount of people that have helped with this project from internationally and that sort of thing. It takes a whole village, right?
It does. Well, and just the Jonathan and Tom both were able to witness mating and nesting, and so a note is going to come out of that because there's been no witness to that in publication, and so Jonathan spotted it and separately from Tom. So maybe they'd want to say a couple words about those experiences because they were pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I little surprised to see how turtle meet in a way that I never get to see them meeting like that on land because they are turtle.
But we tried for years. We set up camera traps. We did all sorts of things trying to see some kind of activity outside of the water, getting nothing for like the first 8 years.
I think what happened that time, maybe we installed the camera a little bit high because these guys are like low on the ground. So my experience with turtle meeting, I have seen water getting dirty, but I don't know what's going on. So I very observative every time when I go there. I saw some water rippling on the edge, and I started to walk very slow to see what's going on. But I see like turtle chasing one another. I said, is this the way how they aggressive to fight? I was like just standing there wondering what's going on. I'm just like behind a tree, like my head sticking out to see what's going on. But luckily I witnessed them meeting, and I used to have a video, but my phone gone in. But so I took a little picture and a video to say that I witnessed what I see. So that was surprising to me. I said, oh, that's how they meet. So every time when I see water now, it's murky all around the edge, and you see male chasing females. So that's mating. And I've been seeing that every October or before October when they do mating. So that one is a little strange to me, but still like I need to like understand more how it, what is the starting, what triggered them to do that, how, because to me to explain all of those stuff, I would explain it in this way, the way how I observe those when they were meeting. It's just like when you see a dog, a female dog, when she want to meet, like a lot, she attract a lot of male dog coming behind she. Just like that, I witnessed with the Hicatee. A lot of male Hicatee chasing one female Hicatee, and I mean, this one female Hicatee trying to like get away, but still like they try their best to like pull this female into the deeper spot to mate. One goes to the front, and another one goes by the head and try to bite the female, try to like push it away in the deep, but you know, when it's a lot of guys there, you need to run away too. Yeah, so that's my experience on mating, and there's probably more that I have not seen, I missed, but I still wanted to discover more about that. So that's my little experience on mating.
Yeah, so for my side, I didn't really witness the mating like Tom did. I've seen more courtship, the following of the female and all that stuff, and you know, a little like a little head bob, I would say, that the males kind of do. I really don't know like if that's like a form of attraction, or you know, showing off to try to get the female or something. That's probably more where we need to do a little more research. But I've seen the courtship, and I've also seen the nesting. So me and Tom were like kind of joking about it, because like he's always wanted to witness the nesting, you know, the laying eggs, the digging in the nest of the Hicatee, and he's been working for so many years at the HCRC, and he didn't get to see it, and I got to see it, and I actually filmed it, and then he told me about the mating, and I'm like, damn, I didn't get to see that one. So we're like, we're even, right? You know? Yeah, he showed me his pictures, and I showed him mine. So yeah, we're even on that. So it was kind of a weird situation. I was very surprised at witnessing and you know, the nesting, because it was during the day as well, and you know, during the 2 years that I've worked here, we've always seen nests or found nests the following morning already covered and sealed, and you know, all that stuff. So you know, it's always been like nesting activities more during the nighttime when no one's around, you know. But in that particular event, I actually went to the facility because I think Tom was he was somewhere else helping with something, so he wasn't in. But I was alone at that time, so I went early in the morning. I was going to do my routine checks because it was nesting season, so we always check every morning, see if we find any new nests and stuff. And I wasn't expecting to run into a Hicatee laying eggs or digging her nest, so I was like a little bit noisy, you know, opening the gate and all that stuff with the chains, and I was just starting my walk, and I just stopped mid tracks. I'm like, oh, a Hicatee's outside in the water. What is it doing? You know, because it just stopped when it kind of see me. So I just stopped there and for like a few minutes, and she just continued to like dig her nest. I'm like, oh, she's laying right now. That's crazy. So I kind of snuck up behind her and whipped my phone out and take pictures, and you know, the entire thing lasted about an hour, I would say. Um, well, what I've witnessed, because the nest was like almost already dug out completely, so I wasn't sure how long she was there or when she started. Could have been a few hours or so, but what I witnessed was for an hour. Um, yeah, so I snuck up behind her. I actually laid down on the ground to get all the pictures and the videos up close, you know, to get everything, document everything, because I've never seen anything like this working at BFREE, you know, or in the wild or anyway. And Tom told me he hasn't really seen anything like this either. So I'm like, oh, this is crazy. It's actually happening, and I got the chance to film it, and I filmed the Hicatee finish digging out the nest, laying her eggs, arranging it, covering back the nest, and head back in the water. And that was the first time we've ever documented something like that ever. There have been some older reports that some fishermen being witnesses to events like that, but nothing has really been documented, like no photographs or no videos. And I was the first to get evidence of that. So that was a pretty cool experience as well. Yeah.
That's really exciting. That was something that we talked a bit about with Jacob. Highlighted is the fact that even though it's sort of in an assurance colony setting and captive setting, there's a lot of things that you can still learn about these turtles because it's not been documented, like you said. For Tom, you've been involved with this project since the beginning, and I'm just curious what the highlight for you is in participating in the Hicatee conservation, and maybe the thing that stands out the most in your mind.
The I would say the first clutch of eggs that I collect in 2014 when they hatch, that would be my highlight in the Hicatee world, I would say, because they look so cute. They look green. They look what I call it, speckled. Uh, I just don't want them to like get dirty. I was always there like trying to scrub on their carapace, plastron, keep them clean. Um, I actually become like a mother and a father at the same time because I'm there like I could be like you could sneak on me taking care of this Hicatee because my focus is on the baby. I would be like kneeling down. If I'm not kneeling down, I would be like doing something like cleaning inside the tank. Like, man, I zone out just for the turtle. Like I get into their world, like trying to like understand these turtle. So that is one of the things that interests me more in conservation like that, and I hope I have more life to live to see more. And I guess I have, but like I said, I need to learn more. We need to learn more about these kind of animals. We don't really understand them as yet, but we are getting there. Maybe we need another 10 years to understand fully. So that's one of my interests and my highlight in the turtle world, I would say, for me. I love it.
Well, as we start to kind of wrap things up, I guess the last kind of major topic I'm interested in is we have this is a really cool group to talk with because so many different perspectives and that sort of thing. But when it comes to the conservation of the Hicatee, how are we doing, and what are the things that on the ground that Belizeans need to protect these incredible turtles, and how is the trajectory of conservation for them going?
Well, I would say the older folks or fishermen, like it's hard to change people to let them learn how we would feel for the turtle. It's when it's come to that, I think it's a little really tough because have uh, we have the how we call it the rules, the regulation, but it's never been like enforced on the ground. People been still fishing. Like, it will probably take maybe at least more years to people to understand what they are actually losing in their areas. For me, I had already understand in my village what we are losing in our river, and it's hard to tell the people don't do that, do this, save that. it creates a frustration among you telling the people what to do. So that's a little tough for me to like say. I don't know if you could speak up on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I could add something. Yeah, as far as progress has been going for the country, I would say it's been going okay. Mainly because as a part of the work that BFREE does, it's not only research, um, captivity or in the wild or all that stuff, but one major one is also outreach and education, and advocacy. Because if we have the information and we really know the reproductive biology of the turtle and the requirements and all that stuff, then we can come to the government and say, hey, these would be the regulations that would suit this species, better, and also how we can reach out to people and help them to understand why we do what we do. It's also not only the things that we say, but how we say it, because it has been a part of the culture. Sorry, it has been a part of the culture for years. Like Tom said, there's folks that have been hunting Hicatee and eating Hicatee from way back when, and it's hard to change people perspective and to change that tradition. And so we don't really want to change the tradition per se, but we also want to save the Hicatee for future generations, so we can keep that tradition going on. So during my years here, I've been involved in a lot of outreach and education, and a lot of people got to know me, and then some people call me a turtle man as well, or something like that, or a turtle guy or something. And the way when you talk to people and you like really connect with them, like on a personal level, and you teach them about the Hicatee, that can really be the key to changing someone's perspective, especially when it comes to the younger generation. Because like Tom said, the older ones, it's a little harder for you to change somebody's perspective when they've been eating Hicatee for like 50 years, as opposed to the younger generation. All right, well, my parents ate it, but I've ate it a couple times, or blah blah blah, something like that they would say. So it's definitely still a work in progress, and like everybody's been mentioning, we still need to do a little more research so we can have that concrete set of information to say, hey, this is what we would recommend, as the people that knows about the species the most,
Right.
Yeah.
Heather and Barney, what do you guys think in terms of just what's needed for the future and how it's going?
I think that I've been amazed at how our outreach efforts have really expanded the conversation about Hicatee and other turtles. It is important, and in the beginning we were really relying on other NGOs or just others in general to spread the message, and we were thinking, okay, well, we have the facility here, so hopefully other people are getting the word out. And then we realized we really needed to take ownership and empower people to give them tools to get the word out, and tools are often information. And so we spent a lot of time over the past 8 years really creating an annual campaign for awareness and expanding that to think about not just the turtle but the watershed, and then the land that's to use the turtle as a centerpiece, but really expand the messaging. And with the NAFTURG, the TSA NAFTURG survey that's been going on for the past, now we're in our 4th year at BFREE, we've learned personally about a lot of the other 8 turtle species that exist on this property. And so that has also built our understanding and our capacity to talk about those turtles to other people. And so for that reason, we this year when we do our Hicatee Awareness Month, we're going to incorporate other turtles of Belize as well and talk about conservation issues along with that. So our ability to reach people is growing because we've really pushed partnerships. We've created Hicatee ambassadors. We've done everything from billboards to radio interviews to television to teacher programs. We've really pushed hard for the past 7 years and into our 8th year. At the same time, what we see is habitat degradation in areas where this team and others are starting to do field work. And so we feel like, I personally feel like our messaging is more critical now, maybe even than it was before, because people, the links aren't necessarily being made between the loss of habitat and the absence of turtle and other species in the waters where we're surveying. And maybe Barney will speak to this next. But so I feel good in our ability to sort of gather an audience of people who want to talk about this issue. And I also feel like there's a lot more work to be done.
Right.
This is a very interesting, good question, Michael. Because I practically live in their habitat. Like, I'm always there, right? I know fishing communities for about 40 river miles. Like, I know a lot of people along the river, and I sit and talk to them, and they're really good friends of mine for years. And I'm involved with them. Like, every weekend if I go home and I'm out, they're always talking to me now because they know I work with Hicatee. And it's been a big question, like, how do I get involved with these people without being afraid, without, offending them or putting the message in the right way. And I have a lot of friends that go fishing with me, and just by me talking to them about the significance of Hicatee, like in the wild, and it all comes down to really just teaching them like facts about the Hicatee, like that they take 16 years before they're sexually mature, and harvesting them below 15 inches, you're not even giving them a chance to reproduce, and they look at you and they're like, wow, that's very interesting. And like, between me and 8 other fisher folks, we've released back about close to 40 turtles back into rivers that we bycatched in about 2 years since I've been here. And to see that, like, they wouldn't have released those. And it, like, I always point to the education aspect of BFREE, like educating people, making them aware. That's where big changes come in. And to add to that as well, like habitat degradation, like when I was 10 years old, like the riparian forest was forested, but now in current day, the Mennonite, they bought out so much land and just plant a lot of corn, like right up to the riverbanks, and agriculture use, and like these turtles have moved on from these areas where they've nested in the past, like moved downstream to find better habitats. And as they move down, like a lot of like poaching communities are farther downriver, and what we've seen is that these people are out there catching Hicatee still. And people are saying that, oh, there's no more big Hicatee in these river systems, and they're going for subadults, which is true. Like, if you go out and survey, like we went out to 3 different river systems so far, and we haven't caught any Hicatee as yet. And the one that I was really hoping for to get Hicatee, because they've been there previously, like we trapped all night, we tried very hard, but we've seen like a lot of habitat degradation. And even like from the Savannah field station, we talked to them about how is the moho doing, and they were like, we went to survey there, we were just surprised by the activity. There was just so many people along the riverside, and they were not scared to tell us like we're catching Hicatee. And to just know that I was in this era with this group of people, and I starting to see a change, because our real driving to saving the Hicatee is involving local communities. Like, they're the people that are in that habitat, and they're the ones that we need to give the power to, because like my friends always ask me, how can we protect these turtles? Like, we know where hotspots are at, but how can we protect them? And like, I've been trying to find ways. Like, I tell them we can't report it to the fisheries department. They're like, okay. So there's nothing really much we can do. We just have to hope for the best in the near future. That's why this work is critical, and keeping like doing these field surveys, working with laws and regulations, and all that. Like there is still healthy populations, but definitely there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, specifically involving the local community a little bit more as well. And that's an area that is very dear to me. I hope to be working with local communities a lot more because they're the ones that have a lot of knowledge about these species as well, how to capture them, where can you find healthy populations. They're the ones that are always out there. And I think like that's very powerful, like working with them.
It's awesome to hear all of the perspectives, and I think it's really powerful. I mean, coming from all of you that are working on the ground on this, it's not like someone overseeing it. You guys are really in the battle and understand it better than anyone else. So it's really cool to hear. I guess I've got two more kind of questions, and we can wrap things up. One thing that Heather, you brought up early is just, and Tom's skill, your skill for finding things and seeing things. It's just incredible. I mean, one story I have is when the first time I was here, I remember I was walking next to you and you said, hold up here, and pointed a flashlight maybe 150 feet up in the tree, and you heard a twig snap, and there was a kinkajou up there.
Oh.
And I was like, that's incredible. I mean, there's no way that nobody was going to see that. So I'm just curious, Tom, how you developed that sense and skill for finding things that you have.
I think it's just my eyes. My eyes cannot miss anything. I think I'm so observative. I don't miss nothing when I'm walking, looking at all stuff what's around, and I never miss nothing. It just built in me, and for me now, it changed me with that attitude. Learning different stuff with animal, now learning with human, I can just look at that. I already know what will take place with people. I don't know, it just changed in me. I always talk to some of my kids about that. I don't know, I can point out things that what could happen later on, and I don't know, I just like a gift that given to me that maybe I'm a chosen one for this kind of endangered turtle. So maybe like they said one time, they used to say you could be a prophet doing all of the good stuff. So by doing all of this, I feel like a prophet. So to observe, can never miss nothing, and I could like always be the first to see whatever people want to see. So it's not a competition. It's just like it's there. Like a lot would be right there. I never miss nothing. Even if you're standing next to me, maybe you're not seeing what I'm seeing, but until when I point out to you, then you will see stuff. So that is just like a maybe a practice for me. I been always like that since I started to work out in jungle. I try to see things, finding new stuff, and I work with a lot of researchers too, finding snails, fish. I'm so just like maybe that builds me up to be a person to never um, lose anything beside me. I'm just like too focused on all of those things. Maybe that built me. I don't know, but it's just too hard for me to miss anything around. I always have gift to find stuff around.
Just a gift. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm curious. I'm interested in philosophy, that sort of thing too, and it's just, I've always wanted to travel and see things from different perspectives. I'm just curious, like, just universally what being in the forest and in the jungle has kind of taught all of you about just being human and sort of just what life is about.
Yeah, I think I feel how you guys, because you guys live in the US and we live in Belize. So the first time when I get to the US, I was like, I don't talk much when I was traveling, but I'm very observing everything what's happening, and it looks like I'm in a like a paradise area that I could not see anyone. Like sometimes you're passing somewhere where you don't see houses, nothing. You just see dry land, and that kind of drive me crazy. I have seen a lot of movie, and when I saw those, I just like freeze. I don't have nothing to say. I say everything is true now. So because like if a person that living in the US and it doesn't travel a lot, and when it get to Belize to see these tropical rainforests, it's very different away from the US life. The forest over there is a lot different. So when you come here, man, you see a lot of stuff around. And same thing happened to me when I get to the US, especially when we were in where Heather lives. We went and take a little walk in I think National Park or something like that, and I saw a lot of mushroom. I wasn't walking the trail much. I was like going in out of the trail, like trying to like take some picture on mushrooms. I It just changed me, and people will be like right there walking behind us, and like they saw me doing that, and like they look at me like probably I'm crazy, but I mean the same way like I observe other people when they get here to Belize, like they look like crazy, but it's not just because they never seen those things that they find. So that's really cool for me. I I think that's what make my brain change. I don't have nothing to think about like murdering anyone, but I'm more focused on other stuff, and I feel like yeah, I'm in the glory area. Yeah.
That's awesome. How about for the rest of you?
Well, coming from Independence, it's like a small town. It's really not that much nature per se. It is there. You can find a lot of trees, and then we have pine savanna around us, the forest and stuff. But being in town is town vibes.
Yeah.
So coming to Be Free, one of the skills that I can say I really developed the most was attention to detail. I've learned a lot from Tom, especially. Um, because when you're out here, you need to be aware of your surroundings, not just for fun, but also for your safety, right? Because if you're out here, there's snakes around. There's branches can fall on you. There's thorns, all sorts of stuff that can get you. If you're not paying attention. So being around town, he points out like different things that you could look out for, or he's also given me like survival tips in the jungle and stuff like, okay, if you ever find yourself trapped in the jungle and and it starts raining or something, and you can find this leaf and that leaf, and you could create a hut or something, or this one is good to eat. If you're ever feeling sick to your stomach, you could find this tree and drink this, and all of that stuff. And it's a really nice skill to learn, because then when you take um, that attention to detail skill into the real world, you can find that you're doing a lot of stuff better than you once were. You're kind of like you're upgrading your quality in whatever you do. If it's like homework, or like creating a report, or any little thing and any little thing that you do, you can always count on that to see, all right, I'm really putting out some good work, and whatever, because that attention to detail and the experience of it as well. I'm definitely not at Tom's level. Probably won't ever get there, but I can find some stuff after Tom finds it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would go along with that too. I grew up being outside, but in a very different landscape. So outside still had access to things, and so I would go off and hike or whatever, and be in the forest. But it was like an excursion, It wasn't just living in the forest. And so when I started to come to, and I would say I was sort of observant, but also would live in my head a lot. And so if I was outside, I was thinking, and not necessarily about what was happening around me, but more like working through ideas in my head, like going outside meant a place where I could brainstorm better, or like it was serving a purpose beyond just being in the space I was in. And I probably a lot from Tom, also a lot from Cipriano Conti, from Jacob, from different people, from Dan Dorson and Judy Dorson who were here, like people who are in the forest and sort of create their world in the forest, have amazing skills for observation. So maybe not on the same level of Tom, but pretty close. And I've found great peace and excitement just walking through the forest by myself, being able to listen and look, and I don't get bored. It is not boring. I love this piece of land in particular. I think it's amazing. I've been thrilled that we have more access to different parts of the property because different trails have been created for us, because I'm not one to just wander off without a trail. I'm not great with directions. So that's a real thing. But over the 10 or plus years that I've lived at BFREE, half of the year or more at times, I've been amazed at how subtle the seasonal changes are. It's not just rainy season and dry season. It's not, nothing is one thing. Everything is always shifting. Suddenly you become like super aware, like you said, a stick breaks and you look up and you see a kinkajou. I would bet any of the three of us who are not Tom could also do that. Or you get a whiff in the air and you're like, oh, cat, or monkey, or or it just rained, or I mean, suddenly you just become more aware of all the little subtle and sometimes not so subtle changes that you maybe couldn't identify before. And it feels like a gift, like a superpower. So it's been fun.
When I came here, a lot of my friends were like, "You're making a bad decision. You're just gonna go live in the bush." Like that was it.
Like a bad idea.
Yeah, terrible idea, bro. You're not gonna make it. We give you 2 weeks on tops, like 2 weeks, and you'll be back home, like trying to find another job. And I remember walking in through the savannah and just transitioning the ecotone and getting into the broadleaf. Wow, I was like, such big trees around here, and like walking across the river that was super clear, and just getting in, and like when I came to Tom, I was like, is that a banana bird? Like I didn't even know about birds much and stuff like I've always just had a passion for birds though, and like throughout time, like wow, there's so many species of birds at BFREE, and my curiosity just started to develop because like I could see them, but like what are they doing? And that's where I started to learn about habitats and what habitat this bird might use. And like when I came here, my hope was to see the harpy eagle or a jaguar, which I still have on my list. I don't have it as yet, but I'm gonna find it. And like just being here, like I sleep very comfortable to the point that now I download like sounds to take back home and I play them like at my bedside because I miss hearing like crickets or owls or sounds like that compared to chickens, cows, horses. And just walking around like in the forest, you can learn something new every day just by observing, just by being beside Tom, looking through mushrooms. We like competing, looking for new mushrooms, walking at a creek system, like looking around, there's different fish. And like I love being here. It's not just the bush aspect for me. I looked at it different. Like I look at this place as a home for me, and like in the future I could see myself with a hut like 10 miles up from here or whatever, because I just love being in this environment, and like everybody's experience is just learning from it, like being observant, cracking sounds, all that, like it's a part of it. And I will say one thing, when I came here, like I didn't know much about snakes. Like the environment where I came from, if you see a snake, you take your clothesline stick and you whop it. Like you run out and you whop it. But like seeing snakes through the lens of Mr. Jacob and his passion for it, like, and him just teaching you about it, like I was like, wow, snakes are pretty interesting, and like how they work with the rodent communities and stuff like that. And I wish I could say I could take it home to teach the people that are around me, but they're like, a snake is a snake. Like it takes a lot more to get the message across to them. But I've just developed a passion to want to protect snakes and look at them. I'm still not in the comfort zone to pick them up as much, but I really appreciate them way much more.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially from an outside perspective. How fine-tuned you can become to the environments you're in. Like, I live up in New York, and I can take someone out into the woods with me, and I can point out wildlife and things like that. And it might be things that people wouldn't even notice, but there's layers to that. And somewhere as biodiverse as here, it's on a whole nother level with people who've been here and observed as many things as they have. So it's interesting to hear you guys' perspectives on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good place, and I just want to, I think we've covered a lot of stuff, but I want to open the floor to all of you if there's anything you'd like to close out with, or any things we didn't touch on.
Story time.
Yeah, we could do
How we
that.
all got at BFREE.
That'd be interesting.
Well, that actually,
that would be interesting.
Yeah, Tom first.
Yeah,
So
well,
we'll go in order who came in.
okay. Well, for me, BFREE become a home for me. When I go for my off, I just go in visiting home. It's not a really home, but BFREE is a real home for me. What do else I need? I have house. I get 3 meals of food. So BFREE is my home, and the river is right there. So I don't miss river. I have the river. So anytime I can just jump in. So that's one of the things that the Mayan people follow. They follow the river that doesn't get dry. So houses will be along that river. So for me, I don't miss river. I have the river, and all the people around me, especially Heather. If I don't see her, like, where is she? But if I heard her talking somewhere in a distance, oh, Heather is somewhere there. It's just like a person that have 100 sheep and it have a owner. And when the owner is like in a distance making one noise, when the sheep heard all of that, all of them will like stretch their neck and listen where that sound coming from. They all feel happy because they know what they're gonna get. Maybe a chocolate or maybe a sweet, Yeah. And then that is me right here. I really love BFREE, and I thank Jacob that having this property secure, I would say. Maybe not all. We have seen a lot of things that happening around this property. So, but thanks to him that he gave us the opportunity to be here, and I so happy that I'm here involved with everything that's happening here.
Well, how I first got to BFREE was honestly sort of by accident. I was on my way to Guatemala to take Spanish lessons, and I had the ability to buy like a one-way ticket. So I came into Belize because I'd heard about this place, and I thought, well, I'll just pop in. And I didn't know like what that meant, that you can't actually just pop in. And I stayed here. I made it back with my friend, and we were back here for a couple of days. It rained the entire time, and I was here with a student group, and the bunkhouse was nothing like it is right now. It was literally sort of like an open area with 24 bunks, and so I stayed there with a group of students from Kentucky, and I'm from Kentucky. And the whole time, bugs, rain, like kind of just not anything I was particularly interested in. I did canoe on the lagoon and climbed the tower, which wasn't finished at the time. But I mean, I honestly couldn't wait to leave. But I kept looking at these students who were 18, 19, 20 years old, and from a place where nobody ever leaves. I mean, people don't travel a lot from Kentucky, and especially not here, outside of the country. And so what I saw were people who were having amazing adventures and feeling very free in a forested, rainy, buggy location. And they were learning and they were sharing and laughing and having this, just like I said, incredible experience. So I left. Oh, and I also came thinking I would learn Spanish, but people don't actually generally speak Spanish to me here, so that wasn't a thing. But so I left and just continued on to Guatemala, and thought I'd never come back. But honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about the place. And yeah, so it kind of caught me, I guess. And so through my observation of how other people engaged, I just grew this incredible curiosity for what was that about. How can this place be so magical and also so difficult? How does that work? And so it fueled my interest. I first volunteered, and then I ended up doing, like I said, an administrative job remotely from the States, and never looked back.
That's interesting. Like, you got into it through the dichotomy that was there, the juxtaposition. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How about you, Jonathan and Barney?
So my story is a little bit of a fun one. So it'll take you all over the place, right? So let's start. So like I said, I first came to BFREE in 2019 on a field trip with Independence Junior College, which was my school at the time. So we came here for like 2 nights, I think. We were doing some little, some small research here and stuff, and then that was where we got introduced to the Hicatee Conservation and Research Center and to BFREE and all that stuff. So that same year, we only came on that field trip to BFREE, and then we left. And in that summer, there was actually a symposium being held in Belize City. It's called International Herpetology Symposium. So there's this lady, Miss Dr. Marissa from the Crocodile Research Coalition in Placencia, who the folks from IHS reached out to her because it was the first time they were hosting this symposium in Belize. So they wanted to have like local students present about some of the herps in Belize and stuff. So my teacher, my lecturer at that time, Miss Abigail, she was kind of involved in a lot of partnerships with different NGOs and stuff. In the region, BFREE was one of them, and Crocodile Research Coalition was another one. So since Dr. Marissa knew about Miss Abigail and they were in contact already and stuff, so she brought up the idea about having some students from Independence Junior College go up and present about some herps from Belize at the symposium. So she asked 3 of us if we would like to go. So I was like, okay, sure, no problem. Everything was covered as well, so I was like, why would I say no to that?
Yeah.
So we went up, and it was I think it was like 3 or 4 day symposium, and I presented about some of the frogs and toads in Belize. So I did do a presentation there, and at the end there was like a banquet thing, everyone say their goodbyes and thank you and all that stuff. And I remember the president at the time, Miss Jen Stabile, I think her name.
Yeah.
Her name is. So she actually came up to us afterwards, and she's like, she really enjoyed our presentations and stuff, and she wanted to give us some IHS T-shirts, but they did not bring any with them at that time. They forgot to bring it. A whole 4-day symposium, and nobody thought to bring the T-shirts. So she was like, we'll just take down your sizes and stuff, and we'll send them down somehow and get it to you. I'm like, sure, okay, free shirt, no, why not? So I wrote my shirt size down and stuff, and I kind of forgot about it. I'm like, they're gonna send one T-shirt from the U.S. to me. I don't think so, you know. So I kind of just left it as that, and then I got an email one day. It was from Heather, saying, "Hey John, I got your email from, I think it was from Dr. Marissa, because Dr. Marissa was our initial contact, and she was very busy at the time. So they were planning to send the shirts to Dr. Marissa so she could give it to us, but she was busy, so I think she reached out to Heather about it or something like that, and then Heather emailed me and like, hey, I got your shirt. I'm like, wow, they actually sent the shirt. Okay. So then she was like, we make regular runs to Independence to do groceries and all that stuff. And I know you're from Independence, so I don't know how we can arrange something so you can get your shirt. I'm like, yeah, sure. Just let me know when you'll be in Independence or next grocery run, where you'll be, and I'll meet you there so I can pick up my shirt. So we arranged that, and then I showed up, and yeah, Heather was there, and my shirt was there. So she was like, hi, nice to meet you. I was like, nice to meet you too. Here's your shirt. Cool, thank you very much. It was a nice looking T-shirt as well, and you know, and then Heather was like, so we actually have a Hicatee health assessment coming up. I think it was like the following week or something.
Yeah, it was pretty soon.
Yeah, it was close to that time, and she was like, we're not sure if you're interested, but we do take volunteers, you know, and you guys can come if you want and stuff. And then I'm like, sure, can I bring a friend? Because my friend also came on the trip, on the field trip with school, so she's like, sure, he can come too. So all right, no problem. We both came. I think that was 2020, early 2020. The February assessment that we did. We stayed for like a week here.
Yep.
And you know, we did our thing. You know, Tom kind of bullied us, trying to catch the turtles for the first time with nets, and we were slipping and falling and all kinds of stuff. And you know, it was hard on us because we've never like catch Hicatee with his net, and Tom was laughing at us and stuff. And then he showed us the trick afterwards, how to properly pull the net after we fell in and got wet and all that stuff, you know. So yeah, and then after that, BFREE actually advertised a vacancy for a Hicatee fellow, you know. So I'm like, cool, maybe I should apply for it because I already had that experience, you know, dealing with health assessment and stuff. So I applied and I got the job, and then after that, the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many different
Because of a
things.
T-shirt.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
I got a list of names with no telephone numbers and no identifying information. So I found Jonathan. I don't know if I ever found anybody else.
How about you, Barney? How did
I get involved?
Well, I was working at a roofing manufacturing company for about 3 years. I started from at the bottom, like way at the back, just sweeping the area, working on pallets and stuff, and then I was like, I hate this as a part-time job, because I took that job to save funds to go to night school for my degree, and throughout that journey I worked my way up from sweeping all the way through machines, and then I got in the office, and I was there one day on my desk having a Dr. Pepper, just typing out some quotes for some people I had called earlier, and I see the door pop in, and I see this man. He's just like on the move. He walks in. I'm here to pick up an order for Jacob Marlin, and he just walks to a shelf like fast, and I'm like, okay. So I'm looking on the system for Jacob Marlin, and I see he's buying the sheets that are around the ponds right now. He want the barricade to keep out other turtles, and he comes back with a big bag of screws, and I ask him, are you sure these are the screws you need? Yeah. And I was about to sell him the screws, but I looked at the tips, and they were for metal screws, and I asked him, what are you putting them into, like the beams? He was like, wood. just explained that these are metal tips, like these are not gonna go in wood. And he looked, oh. And then he went back, took them, and there wasn't any like wood screws on the shelf. So I ran out to get some for him as fast as I could. At that time, his order was ready, and I noticed on his logo like BFREE. And I remembered at the university during a lecture they were talking about BFREE and the Harp Eagle project, and all I said was BFREE. He looked at me, you know it, and we just started. I just started talking to him a little about Harp Eagle and stuff, and from there he just, he's very good at talking. He just started talking for about 20 minutes, sitting on his chair about BFREE, and I started talking about some environmental conservation issues from around where I live, and he was like, "Wow, you know a thing or two. What are you doing working here?" And it's a long story I told him, but I started working here to go to school, and I got my degree, but I ended up here, and he was like, "We have a science and education fellowship program if you ever are interested." And I think him explaining it a little bit more, like it's funded, it's an opportunity for you to learn, and those things really hit me because going to school I was a little bit behind because I didn't have as much time to study and whatever because of working. And he said this opportunity could help you build back up that confidence, you could learn, and you still get a little bit of funding to move around. And I really got interested because I was thinking about volunteering at different places with the money that I was saving working there. And he was telling me about BFREE, and I was like, I tried on Facebook. I couldn't find it because I was typing it small, but I had to capitalize it. I remember that was frustrating, so I went out back again to talk to him, and his load was almost filled up. His truck was so full, like he had a lot of things in his truck.
Always
I was
like that.
Damn. And then he said all caps, and then he just drove off. And then I found the application process, and I applied, and then I came down here for a trial week. And after that, me and Heather kept communicating. She gave me more advice, and I gave in notice at work, and I just came here. I took on after Jonathan. I filled in his position, and that's how I got to BFREE, and that's where my journey began, meeting him. So that was really interesting.
It's awesome to hear everyone's stories at different times. I mean, it's cool. It just feels kind of, from my perspective, kind of surreal. I remember I'm only third year of undergrad and just reading the TSA magazines and seeing all of you guys doing this work, and now to be sitting here with all of you in person is kind of surreal. It's like, I think I speak for Paul too. Similar situation.
Yeah, I've heard about this opportunity for years, and it's just never quite panned out. But it's just kind of crazy to just be here now.
Yeah, and just you always have the urge to travel and meet people and see the global aspect of things. So it's really been an honor to talk to all of you, and it's just being able to come down here the past 3 years has made a lot of friends and been able to do really cool work. So I'm grateful for the opportunity that BFREE's given me, and it's been an honor. So thanks, guys.
Yeah.
And so we like to finish off with a little round of turtle trivia. Between the four of you, there's got to be some good obscure facts. And I don't know if we do this in multiple different ways, but I think the one that makes the most sense is if you guys have some random turtle facts that you want to throw at me and Paul, or just toss to the room. Maybe we can see who can stump who.
Oh, so you want us to try to stump you with a turtle fact?
Basically, yeah. If you know any obscure stuff that might be hard to pin down.
I'm on the spot now.
Yeah, I wish we had a heads up. I know Tom has something.
Hey, Tom's got a lot. I'm trying to Bluetooth from him right now. I'm joking.
Yeah, sorry. You're probably our 80th guest, and I think I've told maybe 20 people. It's always on the spot. So
Is it anything relating to turtles?
Anything, yeah. It could even be other wildlife. It's just whatever.
How many species are monotypic in the family phylogenetic branch of turtles?
Well, we talked about this yesterday. Let's see.
Okay,
Let's see.
okay, wait.
I won't answer.
I'm giving this
because-
one to Paul.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna guess 4.
Right on.
So I know it's dermatitis, and then would leatherback sea turtles count under that?
Yeah.
And then I just guessed there were 2 more, but I'm not thinking all the way. I
Good.
just,
Yeah.
Big nose turtle
okay.
and the big head. Big
Yep.
head turtle.
Oh yeah, because bodies. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I should have known that. All right. Cool.
Damn, couldn't stump you, Paul.
Cool.
So it has to be a question or just a fact, like any.
Anything you want. Yeah, just whatever. Yeah.
I guess you guys would probably know this fact by now, but you know, in nature and specifically in Belize, the most or like the main predator of the Hicatee are not crocodiles, like most Belizeans believe, but it's actually humans, right?
Yeah.
Humans. But when they're young, when it comes to the eggs, it's mostly raccoons and otters, river otters. Yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, it changes over time.
Yeah.
That's cool. Tom or Heather, you got any random turtle facts or?
Not that you wouldn't know. I can't imagine.
Especially Michael.
Right? Can I ask a question that I don't actually know the answer to and see if you all know it?
Sure.
Okay, so we're reading
Oh,
of Time and Turtles. You know my question?
Did the mouth pee?
Yeah.
Oh god.
There's a statement in that book that says essentially turtles do all sorts of interesting things. Some breathe through their butt, which Hicatee could be called one of those, and some pee from their mouths. So I don't know what
Oh, isn't that
turtle.
Chinese soft shell?
Yeah, yeah.
So can you give me any information on that? Because that was bizarre to read.
Yeah, what do you know about it?
I actually don't know much about it. I just know that's the turtle that pees through its mouth. Actually, that's like part
soft
of its
shell.
reputation. Chinese. Soft
Chinese
shell.
soft
Chinese
shell.
Yeah,
Um,
I've heard about it too. It was in a phys.org article or something. But there was one study that looked at it, and they apparently have 10,000 plus pee receptors in the mouth that can
Whoa.
essentially do the same thing. I mean, it's like, I think it's sort of relative because pee itself is just extraction of water and release of
I kind of
uric
liken
acid.
it more to like regurgitation than actual like urination.
Yeah, right. It's just I think it kind of falls under the category of metabolic waste production, but it's through the mouth, so it's, you have to think about it in a different kind of context. But yeah, they have small openings there that can catalyze those chemical reactions and then excrete it through the mouth. So kind of an interesting.
It's like having a cap and uncap it. So
Yeah, right.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'll just
Yeah.
have to assume that you know the correct answer there.
Yeah, yeah. There is a lot more. I don't know the specifics of it. It's a good
Yeah.
question, like where that came from initially.
Right.
Who?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Thanks for that.
Well, cool. I think we can kind of end it off there, but thanks.
It's a good ending.
It's been right.
So we both on that.
Best way to end a turtle related podcast, and we have I don't know if there you go.
well,
Like,
yeah, this is
Yes.
Tabasco. I would say the real facts for this turtle that they only come out when it rains. After it rains, go looking for them where water settle down. If the water had already dried down, you won't find them. They'll be hibernating somewhere nearby.
I love the red color.
Real facts.
that's a
for
really
this turtle.
that's a beautiful.
What family are they from, Tom?
Good question.
Are you gonna put it up to the?
I don't know. Yeah.
I know it just looks like a blob.
That's a turtle.
And that's how we end a good Chelonia talk.
All right. See you in the next
Say
one.
something?